I'm Dr. Balaji Narayanaswamy Ramanathan. This is my channel NANRSTR School of Wisdom. As part of daily reading, today we will be reading the history of Theosophical Society by Olcott, Old Diary Leaves, from page number 14. The first meeting of the founders. Since I am to tell the story of the birth and progress of the Theosophical Society, I must begin at the beginning and tell how its two founders first met. It was a very prosaic incident. I said Parnatus Moin, madam, and gave her a light for a cigarette. Our acquaintance began in smoke, but it stirred up a great and permanent fire. The circumstances which brought us together were peculiar, as I shall presently explain. The facts have been partly published before. One day in the month of July 1874, I was sitting in my law office thinking over a heavy case in which I had been retained by the Corporation of the City of New York, when it occurred to me that for years I had paid no attention to the spiritualist movement. I do not know what association of ideas made my mind pass from the mechanical construction of water meters of modern spiritualism. But at all events, I went around the corner to a dealer's and bought a copy of the Banner of Light. In it, I read an account of certain incredible phenomena, whereas the solidification of phantom forms which were said to be occurring at a farmhouse in the township of Chittenden in the state of Vermont, several hundred miles distant from New York. I saw at once that if it were true that visitors could see, even touch and converse with a deceased relative who had found means to reconstruct their bodies and clothing so as to be temporarily solid, visible and tangible. This was the most important fact in modern physical science. I determined to go and see for myself. I did so, found the story true, stopped 3 or 4 days, and then returned to New York. I wrote an account of my observation to the New York Sun, which was copied pretty much throughout the whole world. So grave and interesting were the facts. A proposal was then made to me by the editor of the New York Daily Graphic to return to Chittenden in his interest, accompanied by an artist sketch under my orders, and to make a thorough investigation of the affair. The matter so deeply interested me that I made the necessary disposition of office agreement, and on September 17th was the back at the Eddy homestead, as it was called from the name of the family who owned and occupied it. I stopped in the house of mystery, surrounded by phantoms and having daily experience of a most extraordinary character for about 12 weeks. If my memory serves me, meanwhile twice a week there appeared in the Daily Graphic my letters about the Eddy ghost, each one illustrated with sketches of spectres actually seen by the artist Mr. Capus and myself, as well as by every one of the persons, sometimes as many as 40 present in the seance room. People from other world. I have described all these phenomena and the test against fraud which I lavended and employed. It was the publication of these letters which drew Madame Blavatsky to Chittenden and so brought us together. I remember our first day's acquaintance as if it were yesterday, besides which I have recorded the main facts in my book, People from the Other Warrior, page number 293. It was a sunny day and even the gloomy old farmhouse looked cheerful. It stands amid a lovely landscape in a valley bounded by grassy slopes that rise into mountains covered to their very crust with leafy growths. This was the time of the Indian summer when the whole country is covered with a faint bluish haze, like that which has given the Nilagiri mountains their name, and the foliage of the beeches, elms and maples, touched by early frost, have been turned from green into a moting of gold and crimson that gives the landscape the appearance of being hung all over with royal tapestries. One must go to America to see this autumnal phenomena in its full perfection. The dinner hour of Hades was noon, and it was from the entrance door of the bare and comfortless dining room that Capes and I first saw HPP. She had arrived shortly before noon with a French Canadian lady, and they were at table as we entered. My eyes was first attracted by a scarlet Garbellian shirt the former wore, as in vivid contrast with the dull colors around. Her hair was then a thick blonde mop, worn shorter than the shoulders, and it stood out from her head, thick and soft and crinkled to the roots, like the fleece of Cotswold Eve. This and the red shirt were what struck my attention before I took in the pictures of her features. It was a massive Kalmak face, contrasting in its suggestion of power, culture, and imperiousness as strangely with the commonplace visages about the room as a red garment did with the grey and white tones of the walls and woodwork and the dull costumes of the rest of the guests. All sorts of cranky people were continuously coming and going at Eddies to see the mediumistic phenomena. And it has only struck me on seeing this eccentric lady, and this was but one more of the sort. Pausing on the doorsill, I whispered to Captain Good, "Gracious, look at that specimen, will you?" I went straight across and took a seat opposite her to indulge my favorite habit of character study. Explanation: in a chain shot hit at an American vitupeter, she draws the following amusing portrait of herself as old woman, whether 40, 50, 60 or 90 years old, it matters not. An old woman whose Kalmic Buddhist tantric feature, even in youth, never made her appear pretty. A woman whose ungainly grabs, smooth manners and masculine habits was enough to frighten my battled and connected fine lady of fashionable society out of her wits. Wide a letter, the North, the RP Journal of the March 16, 1878. The two ladies conversed in French, making remarks of no consequence, but I saw at once from her account and fluency of speech that if not a Persian, she must at least be a finished French scholar. Dinner over, the two went outside the house, and Madame Blavatsky rolled herself a cigarette, for which I gave her a light as a pretext to enter into conversation. My remark having been made in French, we fell at once into talk in that language. She asked me how long I had been here and what I thought of the phenomena, saying that she herself was greatly interested in such things and had been down to Chittenden by reading the letters in the Daily Graphic. The public were growing so interested in this that it was sometimes impossible to find a copy of the paper on the bookstalls an hour after publication, and she had paid $1 for a copy of that last issue. I hesitated before coming here, she said, because I was afraid of meeting the Colonel Alcott. Why should he be afraid of you, madam? I rejoined. Oh, because I fear he might write about me in his paper. I told her that she might make herself perfectly easy on that score that I felt quite sure. Colonel Olcott would not mention her in his letters unless she wished it, and I introduced myself. We became friends at once. Each of us felt as if we were of the same social world, cosmopolitan free thinkers and in close touch than which the rest of the company, intelligent and very worthy as some of them were. It was the voice of common sympathy with the higher occult side of man and nature, the attraction of soul to soul, not that of sex to sex. Neither then at the commencement nor even afterwards had either of us the sense of the other being of the opposite sex. We were simply chums, so regarded each other, so called each other. Some basic people from time to time dared to suggest that a closer to bound us together, as they had that that poor, malformed, persecuted HPP had been the mistress of various other men, but no pure person could hold to such an opinion after passing any time in her company and seeing how her very look, word, and action proclaimed her sexlessness. Strolling along with my new acquaintance, we talked together about the eddy phenomena and those of other lands. I found that she had a great traveler and seen many occult things and adepts in occult science, but at first she did not give me any hint as to existence of the Himalayan stages or of her own powers. She spoke of the materialist tendency of American spiritualism, which was a sort of debauch of phenomena accompanied by comparative indifference, a philosophy. Her manner was gracious and captivating, her criticism upon men and things original and wide. She was particularly interested in drawing me out as to my own idea about spiritual things and expressed pleasure in finding that I had instinctively thought along the occult lines which she herself had pursued. It was not as an Eastern mystic, but rather as a refined spiritualistic that she talked. For my part, I knew nothing then, or next to nothing about Eastern philosophy, and at first she kept silent on that subject. The seance of William Eddy, the chief medium of the family, were held every evening in a large upstairs hall in a wing of the house over a dining room and kitchen. He and a brother, Horatio, were hard-working farmers. Horatio attended to the outdoor duties, and William, since visitors came pouring in upon them from all parts of the United States, doing the cooking of the household. They were poor, ill-educated, and prejudiced, sometimes surely to their unbidden guests. At the further end of the seance hall, the deep chimney from the kitchen below passed through to the roof. Between it and the north wall was a narrow closet of the same width as the depth of the chimney, a feet of 7 inch, which William Eddy would seat himself to wait for the phenomena. He had no seeming control over them, but merely sat and waited for them to sporadically occur. A blanket being hung across the doorway, the closet would be in perfect darkness. Shortly after William had entered the cabinet, the blanket would be pulled aside, and forth would step some figure of a dead man, woman, or child, an animate state, so as to say temporarily solid and substantial, but the next minute resolved back into nothingness or invisibility. They would occasionally dissolve away while in full view of the spectators. Up to the time of HPP's appearance on the scene, the figures which had shown themselves were either Red Indians or American or European skinned visitors. But on the first evening of her stay, spooks of other nationalities came before us. There were a Bulgarian servant boy from the kiosks, a Mussulman merchant from Tiffins, a Russian peasant girl, and others. Another evening there appeared a Cornish cavalier armed with skimster, pistols and lance, a hideously ugly and devilish-looking Negro sorcerer from Africa, wearing a coronet composed of four horns of the oryx with bells at their tips, attached to an embroidered, highly colored fillet which was tied around his head, and a European gentleman wearing the cross and collar of Saint Anne, who was recognized by Madame Blavatsky as her uncle. The advent of such figures in the seance room of the poor, almost illiterate vermin farmers who had neither the money to buy theoretical properties, the experience to employ such if they had then not to the room where they could have been availed of them, was to every eyewitness a convincing proof that the apprehensions were genuine. At the same time, they show that a strange attraction to call out these images from what Asiatic called the Kama Loga attended Madame Blavatsky. It was long afterwards that I was informed that she had evoked them by her own developed and masterful power. She then affirms the fact in a written note in our T.S. scrapbook, Volume 1, appended to a cutting from London Spiritualist of January 1875. While she was at Chittenden, she told me many incidents of her past life, among others, her having been present as a volunteer with a number of other European ladies with Garibaldi at the bloody Battle of Mendana. In power of her story, she showed me where her left arm had been broken in two places by a sabre stroke and made me feel in her right shoulder a musket bullet still embedded in the muscles, and another in her leg. She also showed me a scar just below the heart where she had been stabbed with a stiletto. This wound reopened a little while she was at Chittenden, and it was to consult me about it that she was led to show it to me. She told me many curious tales of peril and adventure, among them the story of the phantom African sorcerer with the oryx horn cornet, whom he had seen in life doing phenomena in Upper Egypt many years later. HPP tried her best to make me suspect the value of William Eddy's phenomena as proofs of the intelligent control of a medium by spirits, telling me that if genuine they must be the double of the medium escaping from his body and clothing itself with other appearances. But I did not believe her. I contended that the forms were of too great diversities of height, bulk, and appearance to be a masqueradie of William Eddy. They must be what they seemed, with the spirits of the dead. Our disputes were quite warm on occasions, for at that time I had not gone deep enough into the question of the plastic nature of the human double to see the force of her hints, while of the Eastern theory of Maya I did not know at least iota. The result, however, was, as she told me, to convince her of my disposition of accept nothing on trust and to cling uh, pertinaciously to such facts as I had or thought I had occurred. We became great friends day by day, and by the time she was ready to leave Chittenden, she had accepted from me the nickname Jack, and so signed herself in a letters to me from New York. When she parted, it was a good friends likely to continue the acquaintance thus pleasantly began. In November 1874, when my researches were finished, I returned to New York and called upon her at a lodging at 16 Irving Place, where she gave me some seances of table tipping and rapping, spelling out messages of sorts principally from an invisible intelligence calling itself John King. This pseudonym is one of that had been familiar to frequenters of mediumistic seances these 40 years past all over the world. It was the first heard of the 1850 in the spirit room of Jonathan Combs of Ohio, where it pretended to be a ruler of the tribe or tribes of spirits. Later on, it said it was the earth haunting soul of Sir Henry Morgan, the famous buccaneer, as he was introduced. So, this is up to page number 10. Thank you for listening, and those who are not subscribed may kindly subscribe, and if this video is useful to anyone, kindly share to them. In this channel, we have published almost 1,000 talks and book reading also. Everything is related to truth and consciousness. Thank you.